And so let's hear a big round of applause. So we want to give you a short overview of things that are coming up in the plenary assembly. And
Jeff, can you lean more into the mic?
okay.
Thank you.
And you'll see a blue sheet that is on your table or in your packets. If you've got an orange packet, you'll find it there. So we want you to review that. But first, we're going to hear from the Palestinian Justice Network, and Ron Shai is going to speak with us for a couple of minutes.
I am Ron Shai. I'm one of the co-moderators of the Palestine Justice Network. Mariana Macy is also co-moderator with me. We work together. Mariana. We are thankful to be here tonight, but we want to call your attention to two overtures that we have worked on faithfully for the past several months. One is RIW 04, on recognizing that Israel has violated international law prohibiting genocide. A summary of these are on one of the inserts, one of the pages right there on your table, on the back side. So the back side of the page that looks like this. This was an overture that actually took about 4 hours to get through committee. To say that it was picked over would be to put it lightly. We're thankful that it came out of committee. I think the vote was 54 to 5. So I imagine it will be on the consent agenda, but if your support as your commissioner will be greatly appreciated. The other is to approve RIW 10. This is on affirming the Kairos Palestine 2 document, a moment of truth facing faith in a time of genocide. As you'll recall, the first Kairos Palestine document was issued in 2009 by our Christian siblings in Palestine. It was basically looking at the Israeli occupation through the lens of the gospel, calling on faith, hope, and love. But much has happened in the last 17 years, so much so that they came forth with this Kairos Palestine 2 document. It was released on November the 14th of 2025, and the Palestine Justice Network, along with FASNA and a couple of Methodists, pulled together this study guide, which has just been released a couple months ago. It is free for download. But it is hard-hitting. It confronts the reality of the situation that is now we now are facing. Calling it genocide, calling it apartheid, calling it settler colonialism, naming it what it really is, because if we don't name the truth, we'll never get to the reality of the situation and deal with it. So I would urge you to support affirming this document, but I also urge you to pick up a copy and to use it in your congregation or use it on campus. The other overture that we are supporting is FIN 07. It's supporting divestment from GE Aerospace and Planeteer. Again, this overture passed overwhelmingly, but of course it could get controversial before. Thank you for your support.
Now I'd like to ask Drew Hill to come up and give us a brief overview. Presbyterians for Earth Care. Thank you, Drew.
Good evening, all. My name is Drew Hill. I'm speaking on behalf of Presbyterians for Earth Care and the Creation Action Network of Presbyterian Young Adults, Canopy for short. We have been hard at work with climate and environmental issues at this year's GA, and thank you to your continued support and prayers. I'm grateful to report that all three overtures supported by Presbyterians for Earth Care and Canopy have now been approved by their committee and referred to the plenary. The first, Changing Course for a Green Future, calls on our church's investment agencies to transition away from fossil fuel investments as part of our broader witness to creation care and a just transition to clean energy. The second, CLJ03, begins the design process for a Green Future Fund that could one day provide financial support to congregations and ministries seeking to implement sustainability initiatives, reduce their environmental impact, and invest in long-term ecological resilience. And the third, CLJ04, focuses on regenerative agriculture, encouraging the church to deepen its commitment to land stewardship practices that honor God's creation. None of this work would have been possible without the faithful work of so many commissioners and young adult advisory delegates that ask thoughtful questions, engage in respectful discernment, and listen deeply. Many members of Presbyterians for Earth Care and Canopy contributed to the drafting, advocacy in committees, and presenting to presbyteries to build understanding and support for this work. As these overtures move to the full assembly, we ask for your continued prayers and support for wisdom and discernment. May the church continue to bear faithful witness to God's call to care for creation. Thank you.
Great. So there are several other overtures that we just want to call brief attention to. Most of these are covered in the blue paper. So we encourage you to take that for your reference. Hand it out to others who may not be familiar with it. First of all, the GAO 02, the In-Person Assemblies Overture. Some of you may wonder, what does this have to do with peace and justice? Oh, sorry. What does this have to do with peace and justice? Well, we believe that we really can't make progress on the critical issues that are facing the church and facing the world unless we have in-person assemblies. Yes. Those of you who have experienced assemblies before know how vital those assemblies were. Having exhibit halls where you could interact, share meals together, and really have discussions about the critical issues before the church. So we really want to encourage you to support this. We're quite certain that the administration of the church is going to come back with a minority report and explain how expensive it is, but I don't trust those numbers looking at them, so just be aware and ask the hard questions that are necessary for them to really be straight with you about what we can expect. We are a connectional church, and in order to be a connectional church, we need to be face-to-face with them. Let's see. Let's see, PPF supports RUS 01 and 07 opposing Christian nationalism. Beth Wiley, who's one of the authors of one of those assemblies, RUS 01, is with us here. Thank you for writing that, Beth. And we wholeheartedly support the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, 05. That's a really important step. We're glad to see that we're calling on our political leaders to check the power of the president in RUS 13. Calling for reform of detention centers is also important, and condemning the cruel immigration enforcement of RUS 14 is also really important. I would just finally note that it is tragically ironic that we're not able to have any action on addressing the war with Iran in this assembly. I think that that's a tragic oversight, but we have to keep working and look for other ways to do that. So, again, if you have any questions about these overtures, please feel free to grab a PPF member, and you can talk to me or anybody else who knows a lot more about these things than I do. We look forward to having conversations with you and blessings on your work in the plenary. So, are you going to introduce the next part?
You can do that.
Okay. Well, we're going to have a few people representing the groups represented here today come up and give us a little brief representation of what they're up to. Addie, I know that you're those. Who else? Yeah. Okay, Brian. All right. So, Addie, Brian, come on up.
our church friends. I am on the Palestine Justice Network. On the steering committee, I also work for FOSNA, Friends of Seville North America. So happy to staff you around Palestine if that's an interest. But really I'm here to say we've got so many good curricula for your church. And yes, it's free, and yes, we do have enough for everybody to take some for their church. So everything at that table in the back is free. If you are interested in handmade items that are made of olive wood, we ask for a donation, but we are excited to give you those resources. Also want to say, if anyone was on the committee for Finn or for RIW, was anyone on that committee? Okay, I would like to give you a free Kairos Palestine study guide because you helped to approve this for our denomination, and that's going on the consent agenda. So I'd like to give you two a free copy of that. Let's clap for their work. And if anyone else is interested in getting that curricula, it's available for free at this QR code, which is sitting underneath your plate right now. The final thing I want to say is that one thing that Palestine Justice Network does is we equip preachers through the Hosanna seminar. So we gather folks for a seminar to talk about how do you talk about this with your church, how do you talk about it at the pulpit. If you're interested in that, we hold that once a year and we move around to try and capture as many preachers as we can. We'll be in the LA area in August. And Free Palestine?
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Ellison. I am Executive Director of the Covenant Network of Presbyterians. I want to say thank you to PBF for hosting this event and for extending this very gracious invitation to partner organizations like ours. I was reminiscing with Marjorie and with Harry about how there used to be a commissioner convocation on Friday nights that the Covenant Network put on back when we had a bunch more opportunities for events and functions, the kinds of things we can do again someday when there's in-person General Assemblies. But in the meantime, I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity to say a few words. A couple business items that the Covenant Network has been focusing on at this assembly. We really want to celebrate the good work that was done in committees. We can actually say we endorse every single action that the Gender and Sexuality Justice Committee has sent on to the assembly. We're also celebrating the actions of the Constitutional Interpretation Committee. In the case of the effort to rehash Amendments 24A and 24C with a special committee, that disapproval we think is definitely the best thing for the church. We also are grateful that the overture from Sierra Blanca Presbytery, the so-called monogamy overture, will be referred to be part of a comprehensive theological framework being carried out by the Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy. That overture needs to not get any more oxygen than it already has, and that is the right way to do that, to put it in the context of a grounded theological reflection that really reflects the church's response to all of the issues around families and marriage and sexuality and gender in this current day. So we're grateful for that committee's work and hope that the commissioners will support that as well. We have more information about other issues that we have supported that are up at our table over here. We also have some pronoun buttons and some swag from the Covenant Network of Presbyterians. And I have an announcement. You are the first group to hear this announcement. This is breaking news. The Covenant Network of Presbyterians, after a 10-year hiatus, is going to have a national conference again that will bring people together from across the church and across the country. It's going to be in the fall of 2027, so you have a lot of time to put it on your calendar. It's going to be at Fourth Presbyterian Church in Chicago. It's September of 2027. We're excited about it. I have little flyers if you want to just be able to save the date, and we're excited to welcome you to that. So think about it, put it on your calendar. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you all, and now we're waiting for Marjorie to come forward and talk about the Atwood Institute coming up this fall.
Hi everyone, I'm Marjorie Rossi. I'm the Minister for Gun Violence Prevention for the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. And I want to draw your attention. Did everybody get one of our little orange bags? You will note that they fold up really nicely to fit in your luggage, nice and flat. So easy carry to get all of this information home. But if you look in there, you will find two things that I want to draw your attention to. One is the work of the Gun Violence Prevention Ministry of the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. On this one card, you can get to all the different things that we have available for you. There's QR codes on the bottom of this card, as well as links if you're not a QR code person. And it tells you about the different resources that we have available for you on one side. And then it tells you about things that we do that are in person or on Zoom that are also available for you. So on our online options, we have 2 action circles. One is about protecting children from gun violence, because did you know that gun violence is the #1 reason that children die in this country? It is. This is the #1 cause of death in the United States of America. So we are, in response to the action that was taken unanimously by the General Assembly in 2024 to protect children from gun violence, we have created this action circle, and we will help teach your church how to take action to protect children. We also have action circles for Guns to Gardens, which, if you are interested in learning more about that, show up for Community Day tomorrow morning, and you'll get to see someone forge guns into garden tools. Our in-person event that I specifically want to draw your attention to is the Atwood Institute, which is shorthand for the James Atwood Institute for Congregational Courage. And the reason we named it that is that gun violence is a huge issue in our country, and people often feel paralyzed. And what we need to do in order to respond to it as a ministry, we need to find our courage. James Atwood was a mentor. He was a member of PPF. He was a fierce advocate around gun violence prevention. So we named it for him. And he is the person that kind of calls us forth, calls the church forth into doing gun violence prevention ministry. So we are going to gather in Kansas City, Missouri, September 15th to 18th, and we are going to teach people from your congregations how to do gun violence prevention ministry. We have an excellent speaker coming for our keynote, who is going to talk about what it means to disrupt the thinking that is in place that allows for gun violence to be the #1 killer of children in our country. And what do we do about that? How do we intervene in that? So we will have experts there. We will have regular, ordinary church folks who have figured out how to take action in their church, and they will be there as well to help you learn what are the hurdles you need to get over and how do you get over them. So come and join us. We have scholarships available if you need them. There's a QR code on the back of this postcard that's in your orange bag that you can go to just sign up, and it will get you all the information that you need to know. If you have more questions than what's on the page, I'm right here. Come talk to me about gun violence, just like my button says. Thanks all.
Thanks, Marjorie. Thanks for all the partnerships we have. And now a presentation of the Peace Seeker Award. I want to invite Sean and Bill to come forward, the presenters of this, or Deanna, and know that the people who receive this award tonight are in a long line of Peace Seeker Award people, such as John Fife,
James Atwood,
James Atwood,
Harry Edwards.
me, and William Barber, and as we all know, Mr. Rogers. And so it's a long line of distinguished people, except a few, but we're all good. So I'm going to look to the next person. Shano.
I'll put this, no, do it on that.
the small reminder that obviously we have biannual assemblies at this point in history. And so this evening we are recognizing both 2025 and 2026 awardees.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Deanna Driver-Gemmer, and I serve on the Executive Committee of Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, and I'm connected with Presbyterians for Abolition. So if you're interested in abolition work, come find me. I'd love to invite you to join our small but mighty working group. It's my pleasure tonight to present the 2025 Earth Peace Seeker Award. And so we're going to invite up Presbyterians for Earth Care to receive this award. We strongly believe that Earth Care and fossil fuel investment are acts of peacemaking for the future. And for 30 years, Presbyterians for Earth Care and its young adult network Canopy have led congregations in Earth Care. And now they lead the effort for the PCUSA to finally divest from fossil fuels. That action will help mitigate the violence and war that climate change will bring. So we are grateful for your work. Here is this beautifully framed certificate, and we'd like to invite you to share with us anything you'd like to.
My name is Lucy Youngblood. I'm the Southeast representative of Presbyterians for Earth Care. And considering all the folks that are on our committees, I'm one of the, not younger by age, but younger by amount of time spent on PTC. So I celebrate, hey, we can always take new members. If you want to sign up, it's over there. But I'm also aware that we are having our National Semi-Quincentennial celebration in a couple of days. Yes, we are grown-ups, we can say big words. And I think about what can I do to help celebrate this event? And it goes back to, what do I do if I love my country? If I love my country, I show love to my neighbor. And all of us here are showing love to our neighbor in one specific way or another, and those who are watching online, even more ways. And what's more, when we love our neighbor, close neighbor, the ones we live next to, or the ones who speak the same language we do, or who pronounce the word pecan correctly, even if we're speaking with people who are very different from us, or who are on a different side of the world, if we love our close neighbor, that leads us to love our international neighbor. And so may blessings be on all of us as we continue the work that Christ called us to do in the acts of peace. Thank you so much.
Let's get some folks from Westminster up here. I gotta say, it is such a joy for me to be able to present this award to you. The Peace Fellowship has been giving out this award for 60 years now. And it usually goes to an individual or several individuals. On one occasion, it went to a college. And on a few occasions, it's gone to an organization, like the presentation we just had. Until today, it's only gone to 2 churches. And when the executive committee of the Peace Fellowship was deciding who should we give it to this year, it was pretty easy for us to come to consensus on your church. When your community was visited with horrible violence, and the community, responded, and you opened your church, you provided funds, you took risks, and we know you weren't the only church, but as the Peace Fellowship leadership, we said, this is what the church is. This is what the church should be. And so we're really proud to be able to present this award to you. And so the award says it's presented to Westminster Presbyterian in Minneapolis for multifaceted responses of ministry in service to and solidarity with people of immigrant backgrounds and people who want to stand against harm to neighbors, recognizing also the many other Twin Cities congregations and individuals.
Bill, thank you. Thank you all so much. It's rare that anybody from Minnesota gets a standing ovation for in Wisconsin. If I didn't have these witnesses here, no one would believe me when I got back home and reported this, that you all stood up and applauded for us. But in all seriousness, good evening, everyone. I'm Vince Thomas. I am an elder at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I serve Westminster as clerk of session. And I'm here this evening with two other Westminster session members, Reverend Dr. Jessica Patchett, our moderator and Westminster's senior pastor and head of staff, and Reverend Dr. David Tsai Shin, our associate pastor for congregational care, and David's wife, Julie, made the trip from Minneapolis with us as well. And Westminster member Alex Boltz is here with us tonight, too. Alex is an inquirer under care of Westminster's session as a young adult advisory delegate to the 227th General Assembly. Alex is an incoming first-year student at Princeton Theological Seminary.
All right.
We bring you greetings from our congregation. And on behalf of the session of Westminster Presbyterian Church, I accept the 2026 Peace Seeker Award. We accept this award with gratitude and the requisite humility. On behalf of our session, I thank the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship's Executive Committee and General Assembly Planning Group for selecting our congregation as the recipient of this award. We are humbled to have Westminster's name added to that list that was recited earlier, a list that in addition to those names includes Stated Clerk William Thompson, who was the first recipient of this award in 1970, and includes organizations that form to oppose human trafficking and nuclear weapons. So we are honored to have our name added to that list. And I must say, I did not know until tonight that we are one of only now 3 congregations to receive this award. More importantly, though, we accept the 2026 Peace Seeker Award with humility alongside the many, many other faithful, peace-seeking Twin Cities Presbyterians who responded to Operation Metro Surge in many, many different ways. So thank you for acknowledging them on the award and in the presentation. We are blessed at Westminster to have the largest membership of the 60 churches in the Presbytery of the Twin Cities area. And we are the only church on Nicollet Mall, which is the main street of downtown Minneapolis. So our size and our location gave us visibility and caused other Twin Cities congregations to look to us to speak up and speak out in response to Operation Metro Surge. So we acted in part because we recognized that not only were people in our congregation looking to us for leadership, but that other congregations, other people of faith in the Twin Cities were looking to us for leadership and advocacy too. In contrast, there are many Presbyterian congregations in our presbytery whose membership is only about 10% as large as ours. They're located on neighborhood streets with names that aren't widely recognized. Those congregations and those individuals, they recognized only this, that something needed to be done to protect,
their neighbors who were vulnerable and comfort their neighbors who were afflicted. And they didn't wait to be asked or encouraged to act. They just did it. And they were alongside us back in January. And so we accept this award with them alongside us tonight in June. And we pledge to continue leading a ministry that the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship will be proud to point to as one that it recognized with the Peace Seeker Award. We wish the Presbyterian Fellowship continued success in its work, starting with the work that it is doing at the 227th General Assembly. Thank you all.
So again, thanks to Presbyterians for Earth Care and from Westminster Presbyterian Church in Minneapolis for the fine work you are doing and will continue to do. Your name is now listed among all the others from 1970. So thank you, thank you. And so this doesn't come without some kind of cost. This is what happens when you're in a Presbyterian situation. It means a basket doesn't mean it's the reciprocal of your name tag when you're done. It means it's an offering plate done with great care, with grace, with generosity. And so I invite Ben Daniel to come forward and talk a little bit more about what that means to have an offering basket on your table.
Hello, friends. My name is Ben Daniel. I am on. Most people drop the mic afterwards. So, my name is Ben Daniel. I am on the executive committee of the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, and I am from Oakland, California, where I'm the pastor of Montclair Presbyterian Church and co-moderator of the Presbyterian of San Francisco. I'm also the author of this book over here, Grace Over Guns, which proposes, invites folks into a conversation about military violence, and I draw a lot of inspiration in that book from the work that I have done with Presbyterian Peace Fellowship's Peace Church Working Group. So if you are interested in exploring pacifism and rejecting military violence, talk to us and come buy my book. There's too many to carry home. So, but what I want to ask now is, how many of you believe that, as I believe, that Presbyterians should speak out prophetically and passionately on issues involving peace? Raise your hand. Thank you. Now, the good news is that we all affirm together that it is the job of Presbyterians to speak up about peace. The challenge, I was going to say it's the bad news, but maybe it's actually the good news. Look around the room. Look at the hand. Everybody who raised their hand, it's us. We're the ones. We are the Presbyterians who will make peacemaking happen in the Presbyterian Church USA. The Presbyterian Church, for better or for worse, eliminated its peacemaking program in the middle of a U.S.-funded genocide. Amen. Right? When the United States militarized immigration enforcement in Minneapolis and in Oakland and in Los Angeles and in other places, when the United States invaded and occupied our cities, when the United States attacked civilian boats in the Caribbean and in the Western Pacific, when the United States waged war on Venezuela, as the war in Iran, in Lebanon, and other places continues, as American gun ownership grows, we don't have a peacemaking program in the Presbyterian Church USA. It's up to us. At a time when international cooperation is needed more than ever, We no longer have mission co-workers. It's up to us. It's up to you. It's up to me individually and collectively to make peacemaking happen. If, like me, you don't believe military violence is a viable option, that's up to us. If, like me, you believe that Palestinians deserve a shot at a good life, that's up to us. If, like me, you think gun violence is out of control, that's up to us. If you think we need to reform our prison and policing system, dearly beloved, it's us. You know, the people in Louisville, we have some people in Louisville doing really good work, but Presbyterian peacemaking starts here. It starts in this room, and it starts with like-minded people who aren't with us, but who would be with us if they had the good grace to be in Milwaukee, or the good luck. So friends, I hope you will support Presbyterian peacemakers work. I hope you'll join me in supporting the work of Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, because here's something I learned. Before our denomination had a peacemaking program, Presbyterian Peace Fellowship was there and existed. In fact, the Presbyterian Church USA's peacemaking program came into being as a result of the work of Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. We were there then, we'll be there into the future, with or without Louisville. It's up to you, it's up to me, it's up to us together to make peace happen, to make a ministry, a prophetic proclamation of peace happen in the Presbyterian Church. So dearly beloved, I hope you will join me in supporting the work of Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. I believe there are QR codes you can use to zap in your support. I believe there are baskets making their way around the room. Friends, thank you so much for doing the work of peace. Amen.
Thank you so much, Ben. And now I think we need to do a little breathing before our speaker tonight, our esteemed speaker. We've been sitting here listening to people for 45 minutes. Have you checked your watch? It's been 45 minutes. It may have gone.
Any more food? If anybody wants more food.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Marjorie.
Yeah.
If anyone wants any more food, you'll see we have quite a bit of food left. So please feel free to walk up anytime and find that. But let's all now take a few seconds here before our speaker is introduced by breathing in the peace of God this night. Let's breathe in the love of God. And let's breathe in the joy of God. Feel better? Now we have a great treat for all of us, and I have Monica here to introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Monica Styron, retired pastor from Cayuga Syracuse Presbytery and chair of the Social Justice Committee there and co-chair of the Social Justice Committee with Susquehanna Valley, which also has the Social Justice Ministry. I'd like to, special for me tonight to introduce to you, and I'm going to make it very brief, Dr. Osama Khalil, who is from the SUNY Syracuse University and part of, or leading the Maxwell International School. And he's Palestinian, and he has family from he and his wife both in Palestine, and is from a village I cannot pronounce, but he will, which is near Taipei. And so many of you have probably heard of Taipei in terms of that is the last all-Christian village in Palestine, and it has been decimated. And I had the privilege of being there and seeing and meeting people there from that village. They had a brewery, Christians could drink, Muslims couldn't. And then the other one was making the pottery, the doves that could be used in worship, the peace doves. Wonderful people, and they opened my eyes to a lot of the things that were in the scriptures. You know, a lot of the stories we heard. We got to see what it actually looked like. So it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Khalil to you. He has a wonderful message to bring you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Make sure I project though. Thanks for that generous introduction. I'm honored, really humbled to be here with you tonight at the Peace Gathering and learn more about the amazing work you're all doing. It's really very impressive. I want to take a moment to thank Reverend Monica and Sherry Skinner and the Palestine Justice Network for inviting me. I also want to thank you for considering the overtures this year related to Palestine and the genocide in Gaza. So before we start, we have a QR code on your table if you want to take a look at there's some slides there with some additional information you can follow along with, some QR codes for donations, etc. So the title of my talk this evening is From Gaza to Minneapolis. And the connection between these two, as I'll show, is not superficial, it's not merely rhetorical. They're intertwined by deliberate policies of oppression and cruelty that are key features of America's forever wars, both at home and abroad. And these policies, I'll explain, have been institutionalized by the close ties between the United States and Israel. So as Americans, we're often told that our domestic policies are distinct, that even domestic politics is distinct from foreign policy. What happens overseas is different from what happens here because citizens have rights and freedoms that are guaranteed. We had presidents make the claim that our wars and actions abroad are to ensure safety and our freedoms at home. Now, 2 decades ago, as many in this room will remember, President George W. Bush said, "We are fighting them there so we don't have to fight them here." But the war on terror, just like the Cold War and even the war on drugs, was not just fought on a distant battlefield. It was fought in our cities, in our towns, and even in our homes. But rarely have the cost of these conflicts been openly discussed, and even more rare the trade-offs. In other words, what are we told is not affordable, is not realistic, is not possible, because we must focus on defense, national security, crime. Everything else is outlandish. And over the past 2.5 years, politicians have been increasingly candid about these trade-offs. Just a few weeks ago, in the midst of the war with Iran, President Trump declared it's not possible for us to take on daycare, Medicare, Medicaid. The federal government, he said, has to take care of one thing: military protection. We're fighting wars. We're fighting wars. Now, last week, when the interim agreement was signed with Iran, Vice President Vance was even more blunt, because he was countering criticism of the agreement in Israel and by pro-Israel supporters here in the U.S. And he explained that 2/3 of the weapons that Israel have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. And here the Vice President may actually be understating how much the United States and American taxpayers have supported Israel's genocidal campaign, as well as its expansionist wars across the region, in Syria and Lebanon and beyond. In October 2024, a year into the genocide, a Brown University study found that the United States was paying 70% of Israel's war in Gaza. And that was as of the first year. That war has continued until today, as does America's funding, the arming, and coordinating with Israel. This is an American war, make no mistake of it. American troops are on the ground. They are at sea. This is an American war. It is another American genocide. So what have we gotten for that funding? Has peace been realized in the Holy Land? Is America safer and more secure? Instead, the genocide in Gaza has created yet another fault line that divides Americans from each other and has exposed the misplaced priorities and policies of successive administrations, Republicans and Democrats. This is not just about President Trump, as I was talking about. And it's to the genocide in Gaza that I will now turn. I want to caution you, some of the pictures that are in the slides are graphic. Some of what I'll be describing is extremely graphic. And there are many heartbreaking stories to be told of the genocide. Some have already come out, some you may know, others are still to come, and some will never be told. Dr. Hussam Abu Safia is a pediatrician. He was the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza, near Jabalia. He's a man I met when he was a young man. On October 24, 12 months into the genocide, his hospital was surrounded by Israeli forces. And Dr. Abu Safia went on social media and also started doing interviews, including with American reporters, to talk about the repeated targeting of the hospital and the collapse of Gaza's healthcare system. Keep in mind, northern Gaza is home to roughly 400,000 to 1 million people. Now, he was briefly detained by Israeli forces and then released. Upon his release, he found out that his 15-year-old son, Ibrahim, had been killed by an airstrike at the entrance to the hospital. An airstrike at the entrance to a hospital, a war crime. And they killed a 15-year-old. Dr. Abu Safia buried his son on the hospital grounds, and he stayed in the hospital, administering to his patients. A month later, in November, he was wounded by an Israeli quadcopter, which is a drone that shoots. As if that wasn't enough, he stayed. There's a picture of him being treated. By late December 24, Israeli forces raided and severely damaged the hospital, as they did to every single hospital in Gaza. Every single one. They forcibly removed patients and female healthcare workers. The males were stripped and forced to walk to southern Gaza. Now, one of the indelible images of the genocide, some of you may have seen it, it's in the slides, Dr. Abu Safia is seen walking toward an Israeli tank to surrender himself, his back to the camera, wearing his medical coat. And surrounded by him is the devastation, the detritus of war, the rubble, the destroyed buildings. He was not seen again for a year. And then he was seen again earlier this month, when he appealed his detention before the Israeli Supreme Court. Dr. Abu Safia has been held for nearly 18 months without charge. A physician. And when he appeared, there were clear signs of torture and malnutrition. He told the court, "I'm a pediatrician, providing medical care to the sick, injured, and vulnerable. I carried out my work in accordance with international law and humanitarian standards. My arrest is unjust and arbitrary." The Supreme Court denied his appeal. He is still being held. There's a petition that's linked on the slides that you can sign for Amnesty International demanding his release. I encourage you to do so. But this is not a unique case. I want to really be clear about this. This is not a unique case. There are at least 214 medical workers that are being held by Israel, as well as several prominent doctors, including one of the most celebrated orthopedic surgeons in the world, not just in Gaza, in the world, who was detained and raped to death by Israel. There is still an inquiry into what happened. Over 1,700 medical staff, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, emergency responders have been killed in a deliberate and systematic fashion, as have teachers, professors, engineers. There is not a single profession in Gaza that has not been touched. And this is deliberate. It was systematic. This is genocide. Hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, bakeries, schools, universities, churches, mosques, shelters, clinics, archives, and government buildings have been targeted and destroyed. The eradication of life in Gaza was deliberate, it was planned, and it was approved at the highest levels of the Israeli and American governments. Make no doubt about it. Now, you have a small map of Gaza that shows you Gaza pre-war. And here's where it's important to remember for some context. Gaza was roughly 360 square kilometers. That's it. Pre-war. And home to over 2.5 million Palestinians. It was one of the most densely populated and poorest places on earth. Roughly 80% of the population were refugees. These are the original refugees from 1948, when Israel was founded and Palestinian society was destroyed and Palestine erased. So these refugees were expelled or forced to leave their homes, and they're considered refugees, as of course are their children and grandchildren and other descendants. This is the standard definition of a refugee in international law. It applies to Palestinians as it does to Ukrainians, Syrians, on down the line. Nearly 50% of the population is under the age of 18. They are children. And what we have witnessed over the past 33 months is an endless stream of images of dead children and destroyed bodies. This is a war on children. What we have witnessed is an obscenity. On Tuesday, the UN released a report from an independent inquiry that found, and here is the headline: Israeli authorities and security forces deliberately targeted Palestinian children, resulting in genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes in Gaza, and war crimes in the occupied West Bank. Of the official death count, which is standing at nearly 80,000, but it's much higher. 30% were children. 30% were children. There's a traveling monument called the Wall of Tears. Some of you may have heard. It's currently in Dearborn, Michigan, that lists the names and ages of over 18,500 dead children with some information about them. One child, you may have heard of, Hind Rajab. There's a movie about her you can stream right now. Hind Rajab was 6 years old. She was killed with members of her extended family. She was the last one alive in a car, and she was alive for 6 hours. We know this because she was on the phone with the Palestinian president. She was hunted by these Israelis, a 6-year-old child, for 6 hours. So that monument, which ends in 2025, has 18,500 dead children on its name. I want to put that in some context. Number one, it's an undercount. We're well over 20,000 now. That is greater than the capacity of the basketball arena where the Milwaukee Bucks play. So imagine an arena filled with the corpses of dead infants, babies, toddlers, and it's over capacity. The UN report declares that, quote, the essence of childhood has been destroyed in Gaza. The essence of childhood. More than 45,600 children are orphans. Gaza is now home to more child amputees than any other place on earth. Many of them are multiple amputees. There's, of course, a large number of amputees who are also orphans. Indeed, one of the products of this genocide is something that healthcare workers have never seen before in other conflict zones. A new category: wounded child, no surviving family. 45,600 orphans. So it's that context that you realize that targeting Dr. Abu Safia and his family is not unique or a coincidence. More than 1,300 families have been erased in Gaza, entire multi-generational families. So these are not just families of refugees who've been there since 48. Gaza is one of the oldest inhabited cities on earth. There are families there who can trace back their roots centuries, and they've been erased. And the evidence of them has been erased because the Israelis also targeted city buildings and archives. But we are in the midst of a ceasefire, we're told. But the genocide has not stopped. More than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed since the latest ceasefire took effect in October. It's every day. At least 10 a day, if not more. Israel continues to restrict the amount of humanitarian assistance that can enter Gaza. International journalists have not been permitted inside Gaza since the beginning of the genocide. And Israel has targeted and killed deliberately over 236 journalists, Palestinian journalists. And that includes, in the last week, Ahmed Wisham, who's a reporter for Al Jazeera, and in April, his brother, who was also a reporter for Al Jazeera, was killed, Mohammed al-Wisham. 236 journalists. And of course, there are the children. At least 253 children have been killed since October. In the past week alone, these are just a few, and I want to caution you, this is graphic. These are some of the wounded and killed. A 3-month-old infant named Muhammad al-Khatib was severely wounded when Israel shelled tents. Tents housing displaced families. He was being breastfed at the time. His mother was killed. He lost his left leg. And he will likely lose other limbs unless he can be medically evacuated. Muhammad is one of 18,000 Palestinians that needs to be medically evacuated. That includes kids with cancer, adults with cancer, 18,000. Again, think of the arena. 4-year-old Zainal Safadi and her 14-year-old sister Lana were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a residential apartment building in Gaza City. We are 33 months into the genocide, and Israel is still bombing deliberately residential buildings. 8-year-old Julia Badawi was killed in a drone strike, what's known as a double tap. How many of you have heard that phrase before? So a double tap is one of these euphemisms the military likes to use to cover up a war crime. So the first hit, the first strike, the missile, the second strike hits the emergency responders. In the case of Julia, she was killed when they hit a busy street in the city. She's not the only one. On Monday, this is on Monday, there was an Israeli airstrike on one of Gaza City's busiest streets. And it was filled with students returning home from temporary schools because all the schools have been destroyed. So now they have schools in tents where they can. Students who are preparing for the graduation exam, which is known as the Tojidi. Nagad Nishkur, who was 18, was preparing for her exam and was killed. She wanted to be a doctor. So how do we count an 18-year-old graduating high school student? Is she an adult? I faced this with my own cousin, who 24 years ago next month was killed by the Israelis before he left for college. When I tried to bring attention to it, the reporters told me 2 things. He was murdered. He wasn't killed. He was murdered. He was left to bleed out on the ground for 45 minutes, and then the soldiers dumped his body. I was told the problem is he's 18. And he's not an American. There's nothing we can do for him to cover the story. He's just another number. But here we can see yet another intersection between the U.S. war on terror, if not its earlier wars in Southeast Asia, and Israeli policy. In Afghanistan and Iraq, the United States considered fighting-age males, how many of you knew this, to be aged 16 to 60. 16 to 60, and they often went younger. So this is why the Pentagon had this amazing casualty count, that they were all combatants. Like when they did drone strikes on weddings. Those were combatants. And it was only until there were investigations that it was clear that they were civilians, that they were children. In Gaza, Israel has admitted that they consider fighting males to be younger than 16, 10, 12. Nightly on Israeli television, you will hear rants that there are no innocents in Gaza. There are no innocents. 10 babies, there are no innocents. One soldier told The Economist last month Most of the people that my unit killed were not armed. We had cases where my unit killed a lot of people. We didn't check if they had uniforms or weapons. Other soldiers explained that they had an invisible line near their positions called the dog line. Any Palestinian that crossed the invisible line would be killed. And then the wild dogs that have become ubiquitous in Gaza eat the corpses. This probably should have been a dinner talk. I apologize. This is not the only way children in Gaza have been made adults and their murder justified. Last August, Jack Lew, who was former ambassador to Israel under Joe Biden, President Biden, was interviewed by the New Yorker. So as I mentioned, this is not just about President Trump. President Biden initiated this genocide, and to his enduring shame, allowed it to continue. And he and his key officials justified it all the way. Now, many of them, we can name names: Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Brett McGurk, are attempting to make a comeback for the 2020 election. They want to be the key foreign policy heads for the Democrats in 2028. They're attempting to whitewash what they did, and they should not be allowed. So Ambassador Lew, and of course he's one of these officials, claimed that the media reports had exaggerated the number of Palestinian children. He told the New Yorker, many of them were the children of Hamas fighters, not children taking cover in places. That's a whole other category. Children of Hamas fighters. So Lew's statements, as shocking and inaccurate as they are, fit into a broader pattern of dehumanization of Palestinians, one that is decades old. And it's one we also see towards immigrants in the United States. I'll come back to that. So this dehumanization was present as media and policymakers focused heavily on October 7th as the reason and the rationale not just for Israel's campaign, but the genocide. Now, of course, this deliberately ignores, I'm a historian, the larger and longer history and context, but that's the goal of genocide. The erasure of the present and the past so that the future histories can be shaped and told by those who carried out the crime. We even have former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo openly declaring that. We will be the ones who write the books about this. So as a historian, I would encourage you to explore the roots of the genocide and to understand the broader implications of what Palestinians call the Nakba, the catastrophe, the creation of Israel in 1948, the destruction of Palestinian society, as well as the history of the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank that began in 1967, June 1967, and continues until today, over 50 years. And there's an even more recent history that many in the room lived through. And this tells us how Palestinians and Gaza became deeply enmeshed in the U.S. war on terror. The Bush administration, in coordination with Israel, decided that the occupied Palestinian territories would be a laboratory for the freedom agenda. This was the spreading of freedom across the Middle East, including by military force in Iraq, with other plans beyond that. And when that failed, when the 2006 parliamentary elections did not go as the Bush administration wanted, Gaza then became a laboratory for coercion, to demonstrate what happens to a population that does not vote the way Washington wants. So by October 2023, Gaza had been under siege for over 16 years. You talk to Palestinians in Gaza, they will tell you actually it's more like 20 years, ever tightening. It was subjected to repeated invasions by Israel and frequent airstrikes, and then ceasefires that Israel would invariably break by invasions or airstrikes. Meanwhile, Israel controlled Gaza's borders, what came in, what came out. It monitored the number of calories Palestinians were permitted to eat, what types of food that were considered acceptable, what was a luxury item. Pasta was a luxury item. Israel determined how much power and water Gaza could receive. All of this occurred before October 7th, and for 16 years. An entire generation of Palestinians grew up knowing nothing but the siege. Some who had never been out of Gaza and never would leave. Israel has dismantled virtually every aspect of civilian life in Gaza. The UN now estimates that 83% of the buildings have been destroyed. Over 1 million Palestinians, roughly 65% of the population, are living in tents. Another 23% are living in partially destroyed buildings and homes. There's a picture you can see at the front of the slides of a family eating dinner in their demolished house. Heavy moving equipment has been damaged or destroyed by Israel, particularly during the ceasefires, and this is, of course, deliberate. They want to prevent the removal, the rebuilding, and the recovery of any bodies. They've also not permitted any building materials into Gaza. The International Committee of the Red Cross has now warned that because of the amount of rubble, the lack of heavy equipment, and the advanced decomposition of the corpses, not all of the bodies will be recovered. Again, one of the goals of genocide is erasure of the crime. There's an estimated 61.5 million tons of trash and debris. You can see that in some of the pictures. The destruction is immense. The sewage network and related infrastructure was heavily damaged. 80,000 cubic meters of raw sewage per day is being dumped directly into the Mediterranean Sea, often near the now ubiquitous tent cities that have popped up. And summer is here, the third of the genocide. The third of the genocide. Vermin and rats, mice are everywhere. Swarms of insects plague the survivors, mosquitoes, lice, and beyond, and then the diseases that they carry. Children and adults are suffering from rashes and infections. UNICEF warned last week that water is a daily uncertainty for 1.1 million children. And if that's not enough, Israel has left explosives disguised as toys in Gaza and in southern Lebanon. They're dispatching those quadcopters to make baby sounds to lure Palestinians and Lebanese out to be killed. It has affixed cameras. So there's another map you'll see with something called the yellow line. This is what Gaza is now reduced to. On the other side of the yellow line are Israeli forces. But that yellow line is invisible. And it moves at the behest of the Israelis. Prime Minister Netanyahu has declared we were occupying 60, we're going to go 70. And when he's saying this, you can hear the crowd chant 80, 90, 100. What's the point? So they affix these cranes with cameras and automatic machine guns so that anybody who approaches the yellow line and you don't know where it is, you figure it out because people have been killed there. To be killed. And as I mentioned before, there are roaming bands of wild dogs and cats. This is not a post-apocalyptic dystopian novel or movie. It is Gaza today, and Gaza has become a living hell on earth. And this is deliberate. This is deliberate. Make no mistake about it. They admit it. Israel's finance minister, Smotrich, recently boasted on Israeli TV that, quote, Gaza will remain in ruins. In the end, there will be migration because there will be nothing to look for there in the coming decades. The coming decades. Self-migration. The euphemism for forced displacement and ethnic cleansing is at the center of the Trump administration's proposed rebuilding of Gaza, what's been dubbed the Gaza Riviera. It's also being applied in the occupied West Bank, where Israeli settlers, in coordination with the military, have launched repeated assaults on Palestinian villages. This was underway before October 7th and has been heightened since. Oxfam recently found that 1,244 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank from 2023 to 2025, including 268 children, more than the previous 17 years combined. And that ends in 25. Earlier this month, a 7-month-old baby was killed when she was with the parents, car was stopped as they approached the Israeli position. They stopped the car. The soldier opened fire anyway and killed the baby. The soldiers attempted to claim that the parents tried to ram them, except video was taken of the incident, and now they've had to backtrack the story. What is the goal? The goal is quite simple, to force Palestinians to leave, self-migration. And it includes repeated attacks on the only remaining Palestinian Christian village in the West Bank of Taiba. Taiba has been repeatedly attacked this month, and its olive groves burned. There was almost a threat to the actual village itself to be burned down. So whether it was in Gaza, Bethlehem, Taiba, or in Nazareth, the oldest Christian community in the world is being steadily and deliberately eradicated. The oldest Christian community in the world. And they are part of, not separate from, the broader Palestinian people. This is not just a question of which religious group is being attacked. All Palestinians are being targeted for expulsion. All of them. Self-migration is also the underlying rationale for the administration's immigration policies. As President Trump was unveiling the Gaza Riviera plans last spring, his administration unleashed federal agents at home. We watched as heavily armed and masked federal agents descended on American cities and towns as they violently abducted individuals off the streets from their homes, their businesses, their cars, in front of hospitals to drop off sick relatives, in front of their kids when they dropped them off at schools. And the violence that was inflicted on Americans was deliberate. It was meant to intimidate. It was meant to make us afraid. They wanted it filmed. They wanted it shared. There are institutional connections between self-migration in Palestine and the United States. Ever since the Department of Homeland Security was created with ICE in the early days of the War on Terror, they have been coordinating and training in Israel. DHS has organized conferences with Israeli security officials and held joint training sessions. This continued even after concerns were raised by the Americans being trained that the tactics that were being taught were little more than racial and religious profiling. Of course they were. Israel boasts that its tactics have been tested against a hostile population over more than 5 decades of occupation. A 5-decade-long violent military occupation whose goal is to force people to leave. These same tactics are not applicable to a free democratic society. Unless you perceive your own citizens and residents as the enemy, to be managed, and consider your federal agents and police to be an occupying force, and to arm them accordingly. And that is precisely what has happened. There is also technology sharing through American and Israeli surveillance companies. This includes Palantir, which is a subject of one of the overtures. Palantir has not only helped ICE create surveillance databases, which also include American citizens. This is an expansive database that is meant to spy on all of us. But Palantir also likes to boast that they developed a targeting database for Israel to use in Gaza for air and drone strikes. That same database that led to the deaths of over 20,000 children, and where over 50% of the casualties are women and children. And they boast about it. There's another shared connection, and that's of the detention and wide-scale abuses in prisons. Palestinians from Gaza have been disappeared into a network of prisons that Beit Selam, the Israeli Human Rights Organization, has called effectively a network of torture camps. And we have overwhelming evidence, as I already talked about, of systematic physical and sexual abuse, malnutrition, other forms of torture. Meanwhile, ICE and Border Patrol are incarcerating individuals here in a similar archipelago of prisons, some hastily constructed, and almost all with deplorable and inhumane conditions. One of the most notorious is, of course, the so-called alligator Alcatraz, located in the Florida Everglades, but it's not the only one. But here, alligator Alcatraz tells us something about the incompetence and the cruelty. Because it was deliberately built in Big Cypress National Preserve, an area that lacks even basic infrastructure, so everything has to be trucked in and out at an enormous cost. The detention facility itself costs nearly $1 billion, if not over $1 billion. More than Florida spent on hurricane relief efforts for 3 storms. 3 storms in 3 years. That guards in alligator Alcatraz 4 patches. You have a picture of this with the Grim Reaper on them, implying that there was only one way out. And Amnesty International found that the conditions were deliberately cruel, degrading, and inhumane. And now, of course, after less than a year, Florida just announced they're shutting it down at the cost of $1 billion. Meanwhile, ICE itself has spent $1 billion buying warehouses that they wanted to use for temporary detention, and they've now abandoned that effort. That's $2 billion. And of course, there's a human side to these policies. So I'm honored to be here with the Westminster Church, because we know what happened in Minneapolis, the stories that we know of, and then there's those that got received less attention. Alex Pretty and Renee Good, who were murdered, but others like Paul Johnson, who was beaten severely by federal agents and now has severe brain damage. Now, as part of the dehumanization of immigrants, we were told that they were criminals. They're criminals. Not only are they here in violation of immigration laws, but we're going to go after the worst of the worst. That great phrase from the War on Terror. Those with criminal records. But instead, they unleashed federal agents on everyone. They arrested and detained citizens. They arrested legal residents, valid visa holders. They've used a quota system for arrest that's deliberately designed to intimidate, disrupt, and sow confusion and fear in communities. It has all the hallmarks of what the United States did in Afghanistan and Iraq, a similar quota system in which they ended up scooping or killing countless civilians who had nothing to do with what they were being charged with. Many who ended up in Guantanamo Bay, where Americans were told these were the worst of the worst. And it turned out that 75 to 85% of them had nothing to do with acts of terrorism or any terror organization. Many individuals are being deported to countries to which they have no pre-existing ties. There have been reports of brutal physical and sexual assaults by guards in a prison in El Salvador. We also have the same reports about ICE detention centers here, detainees being raped, impregnated. There are likely many more stories we'll hear in the coming months and years from other countries, as well as here at home. Now, as in Gaza, children have not been immune from these policies. Over 6,300 children have been detained since Trump took office, of which 500 are babies or toddlers. On an average day, ICE holds 25 children aged 3 or younger in custody, which is almost 10 times as high. Again, this was done under Biden. One of the few times I'll give them credit. They ended family detention in 21. They shut down the Dilley Immigration Facility, which is the primary facility for families with children, but the Trump administration reopened it. And Dilley is now holds roughly half of the children in detention. And like in Gaza, the stories from Dilley are haunting. Parents who fled persecution elsewhere and sought asylum here were instead arrested and held. Their young children, ages 1 to 3, only know the detention facility is home. They play with rocks because there are no toys or few toys. The children suffer from malnutrition or poor nutrition. They're unable to eat the food at the detention center. They suffer from frequent illnesses and, of course, depression from extended incarceration. Now, it should go without saying that despite what the Trump administration claims, 97% rather, of the children don't have criminal records. They're children. And by holding them for extended periods, the administration is in violation of federal law, not that it cares. What is known as the Flores Settlement, which requires the prompt release of children. But that initial assault by the Trump administration on our cities was launched before President Trump's budget was approved. And here we're looking at, and these are staggering numbers, $152 billion that will be devoted to forms of enforcement and deportation. $152 billion. And that itself is eclipsed by the new defense budget. $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion in fiscal year 27. And this is still not enough because the Pentagon has asked for supplemental funding to pay for the war in Iraq. But sadly, this is just the beginning. And in late September 2025, President Trump signed National Security Presidential Memorandum Number 7, countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence. How many of you heard of this? It's gotten a little media attention, not much. Okay. I have a link in the slide. You can actually read it. Here, what you see is the language of the global war on terror being brought home. And it's applied to, quote, target domestic. They're calling it domestic terrorism, but this is about targeting domestic dissent. The memorandum specifically categorizes opposition. I'm going to make this clear. Opposition to the administration's policies are being described as organized criminal and terroristic conspirators. And it's all under the broad and undefined label of Antifa. And here I'm going to read from the memo. The anti-fascist lie has become the organizing rallying cry used by domestic terrorists to wage a violent assault against domestic institutions, constitutional rights, and fundamental American liberties, which is rich coming from this administration. Now, of course, barring from the war on terror, the Trump administration is launching investigations into institutional and individual funders, NGOs, and American citizens abroad at home who they say support or encourage these domestic terrorism activities. And there is now a broad list of activities that can be charged as domestic terrorism. This policy is now being tested against activists in Minneapolis, in Texas, Michigan, and even a case in Syracuse. Lengthy prison sentences of 50 to 70 years were just handed down to 6 anti-ICE activists in Texas in what amounts to criminalizing speech. This will be a long fight against these charges. Earlier this month, the Department of Justice announced charges against 15 members of Direct Action Minnesota, and here again it was linked back to Policy Memorandum number 7, in which DOJ claimed that the activists, quote, violently opposed the enforcement of federal law, and labeled all of them as Antifa, even though only a few of them identified as Antifa. The DOJ claimed that the activists were stalking federal agents, that they threw ice at their vehicles and blocked access to federal buildings, which is a throwback to an old Bush administration domestic dissent law that they tried to enforce, called impeding government authority was the charge. But the government has not indicated whether any federal agents were injured as a result. Instead, what the U.S. Attorney said was that causing bodily harm is not the measure of whether or not they committed a serious federal crime. Now, if these charges appear to be an example of governmental overreach, they are. And again, it's deliberate, like so much of what I described. The Trump administration is attempting to clamp down dissent before the midterm elections. Let's be clear about that. And for his last 2 years in office, assuming he loses. And it seeks to expand its aggressive immigration enforcement for the remainder of Trump's term. But there is hope. And that's what I would like to end on. We're here tonight in the peace gathering. And I sense that this is part of a growing movement of Americans who are exhausted by war overseas and divisions at home. The war in Iran quickly became the most unpopular conflict in U.S. history, and without a mass protest movement. That's telling. The genocide in Gaza has galvanized a generation, and that has continued, even though that protest movement was squelched by universities and the government. But it will not be enough to be passively opposed to war, genocide, occupation, apartheid, racism, and fascism. As many here know, it requires constant commitment, community, and a shared moral purpose. Genocide is the moral issue of our time, indeed, of any time. And stopping it must be the guiding call to action for people of faith and conscience. The overtures that you're discussing are a step toward that, and I hope we will support them. Thank you, and peace.
We have a little time for questions and answers, and I just wanted to say, even though it's going to be short, we have his book here. He's written several books, so A World of Enemies, American Wars at Home and Abroad from Kennedy to Biden. So please feel free to
purchase that, and he's asking that you make a donation to, on the QR code, to some of the organizations that are working for peace in Palestine. Are there any questions now?
Let me say before the question. I appreciate the applaud. I should be applauding you. You're doing amazing work, so thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Is there a question that anyone have? Yes. Could you say it loud?
Reverend Muntar Isaac, he also has traveled in the United States. Do you work together? Are you familiar with his work?
No. But I'd like to know more about it. No, I'm not familiar. Okay.
Could you talk about what steps you would want to see the Presbyterian Church folks take that would be action steps?
That's a great question. So the question you didn't hear in the back was, what steps could the Presbyterian Church take? I think the overtures are a really important first step. And part of that's about divestment and moving towards boycott, divestment, and sanctions. There really is no other path. When you have a state that is committed to genocide and apartheid, it needs to be made. It is a rogue nation. It's behaving as a rogue nation. And it needs to be singled out for that. Now, of course, the Israelis will claim, oh, you're singling us out. There's other states committing genocide. There's a genocide in Sudan.
Yes.
That the United States is involved in. That the United States could stop with its allies in the United Arab Emirates. And it hasn't. But this is a genocide we're funding. Let's be clear here. This is a genocide we are participating in. When the U.S. sends Delta Force, when it sends missile defense, 50,000 to 100,000 troops, when it sends a flotilla of ships to the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, you're participating. You're an active participant.
With your tax dollars.
Not tax dollars, actual engagement of Americans on the ground. And to add to that, I think it's really important for folks to understand. One of the claims the Biden administration made, you're going to hear this from Anthony Blinken, former Secretary of State. So I'm going to make a couple of points about this. He's going to claim two things. He's said it again and again. We were trying to negotiate a ceasefire, right? He actually claimed that the protest movement helped Hamas because every time there were protests, Hamas got tougher in the negotiations. All this is completely untrue. All this is completely untrue. The terms of the ceasefire that President Trump got were no different than what was available 6 months earlier, 2 years earlier. Some will remember in the room there was a humanitarian pause in December, January, for maybe 30 days. That was stopped by the United States with Israel. That could have been extended into a ceasefire. All the terms of that ceasefire were available. How do we know this? Israel killed more hostages than it rescued. This was never about the hostages. Netanyahu wouldn't even meet with the hostage families. This was never about the hostages. Israel killed more hostages than it rescued. The vast majority of hostages who were released through the negotiations of the ceasefire. That's how it happened. And you'll notice, now that the hostages are gone, why is Israel continuing to advance inside Gaza? Why is the killing continuing? Why won't it allow basic humanitarian assistance? And the UN is warning constantly. So you're going to hear, and they're going to attempt to whitewash this. And Blinken's a good example, right? Remember, Blinken was Secretary of State, right? The goal of Secretary of State is America's top diplomat is diplomacy. Instead, what Blinken did was he went to participate in the Israeli war cabinet. That's not your job. You're not a general. You don't need to be there. Instead, what Blinken did was in the first week after October 7th, sent out a memo to every single embassy. There'll be no talk of ceasefire, no talk of de-escalation from the beginning. The other thing we know is that in the very first months, the administration was planning through its now defunct USAID for the mass relocation of some 500,000 Palestinians out of Gaza into northern Sinai. Right? That was leaked by some of the professors that they approach to help them work on this, because it's a war crime. Sorry.
The Europeans have been sending flotillas in, and those folks have gotten pretty beat up too. Now, do you have any sort of symbolic thing? And we've got a big ocean, I know, and we've got a little bit of Mediterranean there. So that technique doesn't work for us. But we need some graphic, symbolic solidarity things that are beyond the things we've been trying.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think this gets back to Marjorie's question. I think that's where something like boycott, divestment, sanctions is not symbolic, right? And I think for the Presbyterian Church to take that kind of stand and partner with other churches would be a very important message. Be a very important message, and it's also about solidarity. And again, I don't want to make this about a question of faith, but when the oldest Christian community in the world is being destroyed deliberately, there's a reason that the settlers are attacking Taiba, and it's not for the beer. There's a reason they're going there, and they're doing it because they know they have a U.S. ambassador who's not going to say a word. He tried, and then he quickly backpedaled. All right? That area, and you know, I mentioned this in reference to my cousin. That area where Taiba is, where my parents' village is right next door, is heavily Palestinian American. This is deliberate. Right? And part of this is also to understand, and I'm going to put it in kind of a broader perspective of domestic politics. How many of you have ever heard of Miriam Adelson or Sheldon Adelson?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, Sheldon Adelson, casino magnate, very wealthy man, was a major Republican Party donor, but he was also a big supporter of Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud Party. Okay? He died, his wife has taken over his fortune. She has been a major backer of Trump, just like her husband was. The open secret in the 24 campaign was that Trump had said he would approve the annexation of the West Bank. Okay? He has since backpedaled on that a little bit. But what it really looks like what he's saying is just do it quietly without announcing. And so instead what they're doing is the extreme violent acts. Right? So you're going to target, why are you targeting Taiba? Because you know Palestinian Christians can leave. They'll come to the United States, all right? Many have extended family here. That's why you're targeting Taiwan. And if you can break them, then the others fall in line.
There have been many accounts of U.S. citizens or dual citizens being hurt, arrested, or killed, mostly in the West Bank. And I'm wondering if there are any of those that have ever been truly investigated, and if there's been any support by the U.S. government for its U.S. citizens that have been affected.
So that's a great question, and I want to answer in 3 parts. So the question, for those who didn't hear it, was about U.S. citizens, Palestinian Americans who've been killed. So I'm going to give you a very prominent case, and then I'm going to talk about, there's two young women there, Palestinian Americans who are students of Year Z, who have been arrested and basically disappeared into the torture camps. There are young Palestinian American boys. Often what happens is in the summer, when the school is out, so Palestinian families will go back. Okay? My neighbor is from another neighboring village near us. My neighbor here in Syracuse. His son's best friend from the Chicago area was murdered by the Israelis. 14. And of course, you know, the accusation is they were throwing stones, so that's a death sentence. The most prominent case is a reporter. Some of you may have heard her name. Now, she reported in Arabic, so sometimes there's a crossover. Shireen Abu Akleh was a Palestinian American for Al Jazeera. She was killed in 2022, so before October 7th, deliberately wearing a press vest, and she was assassinated. And it wasn't enough that they assassinated her. They attacked her funeral. Israeli security forces went and attacked her funeral. They beat the funeral procession. The Biden administration did nothing. And she's an American citizen. In the early days of the genocide, this did not get very well reported, as you can imagine.
There were Palestinian Americans in Gaza, okay, who were attempting to leave. They could not get coordination from the U.S. consulate or the embassy to help them leave. It was a very well-known case because it was literally covered live on Al Jazeera. Young men, they got approval, the family was leaving, they got hit with a drone strike. He's being interviewed by Al Jazeera, he's covered in blood, his sister was killed, another sister was wounded. And this had been coordinated between the embassy and the Israelis. And they still did a drone strike. No investigation, not even an apology. So when Ambassador Huckabee went out to Taiwan, there was an initial warning not to be attacking Christians. Many of you may have seen these videos. Nuns being attacked in Jerusalem. Yes. This is deliberate. When we talk about Gaza, yes, the vast majority of the population is Muslim, but there's a very old Christian community there that was seeking shelter in a church. And Pope Francis, until his death, was calling Gaza every night to speak to that congregation. And they were being shelled. And again, so some of these are deliberate affronts, whether it's to the Catholic Church, it's a thumb in the eye of the U.S. consulate. You don't tell us who gets to leave, we tell you who gets to leave. Right? And keep in mind, and I think this needs to be really clear, I want to make sure everybody understands this. Israel could not do this on its own. Israel could not attack Iran on its own. It certainly could not sustain not a 12-day war, a 3-day war on its own. So one of the few times you'll hear me talk about, the parade of politicians who come out, but every single one of them, and it's true, Netanyahu has been fixated on Iran for decades and pitching this war for decades. And he found someone who would do it for him, because they know they can't do it alone. And the goal here, you can hear this from pro-Israel supporters in the U.S., many who are talking heads on Fox News, etc., who will say things like, you have to fight to the end. They want to deploy American troops on the ground. They want to keep this going as long as possible. And make no mistake, there is no military solution to this. The Iranians have been preparing for an American invasion at least since 2002. In some cases, since the 1980s. Some of this goes back to the tensions from after the revolution. You would need a 1 million-man army plus and massive casualties. Keep in mind, the U.S. has nowhere to stage a ground invasion at this point. Every single base has been damaged or destroyed. But the Israelis don't care. They're not going to send troops in Iraq. Right? So Israel can't do this. Israel can't maintain its occupation. Whether it's of the West Bank, its actions in Gaza, its economy has been severely damaged. It doesn't even have that large of a military. It has a very effective Air Force, which is very effective at bombing women and children in residential air buildings. Right? They like to brag about this. But they have a small army, large reserves, it's a small country. The only way this happens, and this is why BDS is so important, the only way this happens is with the overt American support, your tax dollars, my tax dollars, going to fund, arm, and keep this war machine going.
As a member of Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, I'd just like to thank you all and being part of the planning committee. It was wonderful that we were able to bring you here. So thank you.
It's been a real honor to have you with us. Thank you. Thank you. And so just a few last words before our benediction. Before we go and listen to Matthew Black down in the sanctuary. That's amusing to kind of lend us into this and take us into this evening and then beyond. But to let you know that Carolyn Gillette has written a new hymn, the 250th anniversary of this country of ours. It's called, if I can just get that name up there, it's called In this time of great reflection, you'll find it in the current Sojourners magazine. So remember that. The music plays a big part in this.
Carolyn was one of our Peace Seeker Award winners.
Carolyn, one of our Peace Seeker Award winners, so thank you for that as well. Also, another thank you to Emmanuel Presbyterian Church. There may be still a few staff members here. Raise your hand to the staff members here. Thank you all. If you want to know how to be hospitable to another group, look at what Emmanuel Presbyterian Church has done. They have been amazing hosts for us and partners. So thank you again for all the accolades you received. We are giving it to you. Thank you for all those who have been part of Peace Fellowship since you were young. You may have been doing this over 50 years. But anyone over 50 years working with Peace Fellowship? Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Yes, indeed. We need your wisdom. Over 40 years. You were over 40 years working with Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. 30 years. 20 years. Yeah, okay. 10 years. Yes, indeed. And then I see somebody who's this tall here tonight that's been around us, who may be 5, 6, I'm not sure. But I do know that Drew Hill was part of my church in Santa Fe, and he was about that age when I went there. And somehow we all kind of knew Drew would end up doing what he's doing now. But he had support along the way, and so we need to support the young people. Thank you, yes. Thank you for being here. And for our commissioners, and for all those who make this possible as a Presbyterian fellowship family as well. You are my peeps. And we should be to one another. And so I look to you for inspiration. So with all that said, I have a prayer, a benediction basically. It is our benediction, PPF benediction. And it was written by the Reverend Dr. Clinton March, PPF moderator in the 1990s, and he grew up as a black Presbyterian in the Jim Crow South. He became a pastor, author, mission leader for Africa, president of Knoxville College, and moderator of the 185th United Presbyterian Church General Assembly. And so, please stand for his benediction that we use as our own. And now, I am supposed to say to you, go in peace. But how can I say to you, go in peace, when you are going out into a world where the climate we have, abuse may kill you, and violence is revered while peace is mocked? Out into a world where race is set against race and ethnic cleansing is a name for genocide. Out into a world where people are hungry and homeless, while the government squander trillions of dollars on instruments of destruction that they dare not use. Out into a world where every night millions of mothers watch their children sink into a hungry slumber, only to awaken, if they awaken, to another hungry tomorrow. With a world like that out there, how can I say to you, go in peace? But I dare to say, go in peace. Because Jesus says, I give you my peace. But remember, the one who says, I give you my peace, also says, if you would be my disciple, and thereby my peace inhabit, take up your cross and follow me. So I dare to say, go in peace, if you dare.
Amen.
Amen. And go in peace, everybody. Go in peace.